Hirohito, President Bush, is here, and there has been startling political news for the president today. The Senate Armed Services Committee just a short while ago has voted not to confirm his nomination for Secretary of Defense John Tower. We go immediately to Capitol Hill and ABC's Jim Wooten. Jim?
Well, Peter, this was really quite an extraordinary moment in the life of the United States Senate. In a little room just down the hall here, the Armed Services Committee did vote 11-9 on the straight party line. 11 Democrats voted not to recommend to the Senate that Tower be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. The 9 Republicans on the committee voted an enthusiastic yes that he ought to be confirmed. This was just one more piece of evidence of how much weight Sam Nunn really carries around here, especially on defense matters. When he talks, people listen. And when he finally made up his mind today on Tower, people began to listen to that, and the Democrats began to take their cue from that. Nunn said he cast his vote reluctantly, painfully, but with a clear conscience, and essentially on the premise that he was still uncertain about Tower's drinking problems. He said he thought perhaps he had an unacknowledged drinking problem. The Republicans maintained their cool most of the time. Senator Thurman got a little heated as he said this is all just a matter of perception, had nothing to do with the truth. Senator Warner said the Democrats were basing their decision on a cobweb of fiction and fact. So when the president gets back next week, what he faces is likely to be a very, very nasty floor fight in the Senate on Tower. Peter?
Jim, very quickly give us some sense of what it's going to be like on the floor. With the recommendation not to nominate, is the nomination dead on the floor?
I wouldn't say it's dead, but it is a very, very tough uphill fight, particularly if this thing gets any more partisan than it's already become.
Okay, Jim, thanks very much. Here in Tokyo, the White House has been on the phone much of the night being concerned about this. They must have sensed what was coming, but the President's press secretary, Marlin Fitzwater, came out just a short while ago and made a statement of support for Tower. Here's what he had to say.
Long time. He is very relaxed about this, that we're in the start of a nomination process, that we still have to go to the floor, and we expect that vote to occur. The President has not lost one iota of confidence in Senator Tower or in his ability to be Defense Secretary. And that will be our attitude throughout this process.
Marlin Fitzwater here in Tokyo, and of course here is our White House correspondent, ABC's Britt Hume. Britt, what's the reaction going to be now that they know the full truth of this?
Well, they've got a serious problem, Peter. There's no easy way out of this for the president. He and Tower are old and very close political allies. He has insisted from the start, after a long delay before Tower's actual nomination involving an FBI investigation, that he would stick with this to the end. He has twice reiterated that commitment. Backing out of it now would look terrible. On the other hand, going to the floor with the prospect of Sam Nunn leading the Democrats against him and losing, therefore, would be terrible, too. So the president is in a very tight spot.
Okay, Britt, thanks very much. A clear distraction for President Bush, who, of course, is here in Tokyo today, as you'll have a chance to see here, with Mrs. Bush to attend the funeral of Emperor Hirohito. The President and the First Lady here, along with the representatives of more than 150 nations, to pay their last respects to the Japanese Emperor. And the Japanese people have taken this enormously seriously today. It is a very wet and rainy day here today, but the Japanese are immensely pleased with this turnout from overseas. They take it not only as an affirmation of respect for Hirohito in his post-war contribution to Japanese democracy, but they're also taking it as something of a collective forgiveness by the rest of the world for his own role, or non-role, as the Japanese now believe it was, in that terrible period between 1910 and 1945, when Japan was so aggressive in Asia and elsewhere. That is just part of a 13-hour long ceremony today, which will end with the emperor being buried in the western part of Tokyo. A little later, we'll be back on Nightline. I'll have a chance to join Ted Koppel. We'll have more of the funeral and, of course, a full conversation in Washington about the ramifications now that John Tower has been defeated by the Senate Armed Services Committee as the President's Secretary of Defense. Until then, I'm Peter Jennings in Tokyo. Thank you for joining us.
This special report came to you from ABC News. We now resume our regular program schedule.
You mean that incident in the street? Well, I understood the man pulled a knife on her.
Dex didn't pull a knife on her the other night.
Oh, that, well, I think that she was deeply upset about Crystal that night.
Dad, I like her. But in my opinion, Virginia has a screw loose.